Hello, another day with body electronics discussion with Guy, Jeffrey, and myself, Elia Hart. And we're going to start today. I asked the body electronics group on Facebook to give some questions. And so we're going to start out with a couple of questions that they posted this morning. The first one is, in your experience, how is resistance released? I really like how that question was formulated because it's asking for, actual personal experience. So a couple of things came to my mind with that. First of all, being a body electronics instructor, that old saying, if you can't do it, teach it. Well, that's the opposite in body electronics. So in body electronics, to be an instructor, you have to actually be able to do it. And you have to actually be able to have the experience in order to share it, in order to be able to instruct it. So that was the first thing that just popped into my mind when I read that question this morning. So how is resistance released? The second thing, because this person is asking for personal experience, I went back, and what came to me was the onset when I really didn't have a really good grasp on body electronics principles. I really didn't know a lot about it. I had just been introduced to it, and I'd looked at some videos and read some of the John's books, but Doug's book hadn't even been written yet, and it was it was just in those preliminary stages. So I was very unclear of how to support the healing crises, how to get through the healing crises. I mean, it was all kind of a very murky territory. So, but gradually and with perseverance, I got more and more experience with it. So then I could, with the experience, then comes the knowledge. So that knowledge is turned into wisdom. So what I'm getting at is, in the beginning, it was really about physical principles and following those physical principles and bringing on the healing crisis with those physical principles. I mean, I knew how to do that. That was really laid out in the protocol, and it was something that I could do. So, I got on the enzymes, I got on the minerals, and so on and so forth. And that in itself started to dissolve some of the crystalline structures, and in turn brought emotion, suppressed emotion to my awareness, suppressed memory to my awareness, and suppressed words to my awareness. It was all, it was just kind of all coming out. So it was experienced in in increments, and there was even times when, well, what do I do with it? I had no idea what to do with it in the beginning. So it was just really following that very fundamental principle: lovingly and willingly endure all things. Okay, I knew that. So when things would come up for me, that would be one of the first things that I would feel, be like, okay, lovingly, willingly endure, and I would attempt to do that. And it was really not really clear for me about really how to do a true, like in my own study, in my own inner connections with body electronics and with John Ray. It was still not really clear how I could get a full transmutation until I started actually doing physical point holding and studying under Doug Morrison. And it was then that I started to put the pieces together. By that time, of course, his book had been published, and so I had that to sort of guide me along in preparation. But then when I really got into the intensives, that's when things really started to happen for me. And I could really get full transmutations by bringing those three creative principles, the word patterns, the emotion, and the memory, into the awareness, where they then could be transmuted. And how they're transmuted is very simple, which is through love, forgiveness, and gratitude, what I call the three powers. So that's really kind of like the basic, like the question was, in my experience, how is resistance released? Well, let's define resistance too for the newcomers. Resistance in body electronics is defined as anything less than pure unconditional love. So, anything that comes up in our awareness that isn't of pure unconditional love is resistance. So I think we can agree, especially as we get a few years under our belt of body electronics, we can agree that we're working with a lot of suppressed resistance that is just bubbling up as we go along and as we move through our own process. So that's the first question. Do either of you want to jump in there?
I can say something about importances and unimportances as it relates to resistance. That was something that really spoke to me, and it's such a subtle thing when you think in the concept of duality, where you have rights and wrongs. Unconditional love has no rights or wrongs, or has nothing that's more important than another. It just is. It's just love. And I know that was a principle that really helped me, because I was raised in such a rigid Mormon. I was just like John when he received these teachings. He was practicing Mormon. But anyway, the perfectionist consciousness that this is right and this is wrong, and this is what, and the whole concept of what perfection is, was so muddled and impossible to achieve. And I so love John's teachings about perfection, and how it's simply seeing the end from the beginning and then doing it. And then you've done it perfectly, even if it's simply as touching your nose, having thought of it beforehand and then doing it. I've done that perfectly. So that's something that I was feeling when you were speaking, Elliot.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything to add there, Guy?
Well, I thought of a question that sort of goes nicely after that, I think. A good answer, by the way. Yeah, really succinct answer. I would ask, how do we know when we're holding points on someone else and facilitating someone else during a point holding? How do we know that they are transmuting? It sort of comes down to our own experience, like you say. But what would you say are things to look out for, red flags? Or
how do we know if, say the question again?
Like, how do we know if the person on the table is releasing their resistance as opposed to not releasing it?
Okay. So the first thing is only they know for sure. And really what they're doing internally is basically none of our business. As a point holder or facilitator, that's their business. They have to figure that out from the inside out. We all have our own. That's what gives us that wisdom, is by finding these things ourselves and really being able to transmute them ourselves. This is self-initiated self-healing. So the actual point holding. So let me jump in, like in relation to that, to the other question, too, is that, well, we'll get to that in a minute. No, I won't jump ahead too much. But what they're doing on the table, or what we're doing when we're on the table, is this internal process. And there is a a very specific facilitation and very specific point holding applied, sustained acupressure, but that is just the just the little bit of physical stimuli that we can give. The real work is really in the internal. So the only thing that we have to know as point holders is and we can sort of monitor, is how what they're doing internally is how we can continue to support that. And so we can do it when we know that there's a lot of burning or numbness or electricity or whatever coming out of the point. Then we know we really have to remain steadfast and really support whatever whatever they're doing on the inside. As far as facilitating that as well, the same principle applies. What they're doing, what they're doing internally is really none of our business. But what we can do is have them, with really, really thoughtful facilitation, we can have the person on the table reveal enough of what's going on so that we can continuously support that, and in a way of bringing them into greater awareness of themselves. So in other words, if let's say somebody gets on the table, we plug in, we're holding their points as steadfastly as we can. Things are really, really burning and things are going really well. The person on the table taps into some emotion. And so they're emoting, they're having some, they're really getting some emotion. So you're really, and it's an intuitive process. I mean, we learn the protocols, but it also is very much reliant on intuition and in the moment, being able to respond appropriately. So, if the person's emoting, let's say grief, so then we will, have them intensify that grief, just, gently be, okay, just, intensify that. And then you say an appropriate question. Can you find a time when you felt that way before? And then the person, but still encouraging the emotion. You don't put the emotion aside to find the memory, you keep that emotion. So that's kind of, the adeptness of the facilitator, that we just keep reminding them, and we can like bounce back to, okay, really, keep intensifying that emotion, but then, still look for, what's coming up in memory. And then that same goes with the word patterns. And then eventually, that's really all the point holder and the facilitator need to know. That's really all we need to know. And I actually discourage a lot of storytelling on the table. I don't think that's, a lot of storytelling, and you can tell if it's a story if they're using past tense, because when we get the memory, we encourage the person to bring that memory into the present moment. That's where it can be transmuted. We're not going back and looking at it. It's not like a type of psychotherapy. We're not going back and looking at it and trying to dissect it. No, we're bringing that suppressed memory, emotion, and word pattern into the present so that it can be truly transmuted and released. So does that sort of give that a little bit of clarity?
Beautiful. And you knocked it out of the park. Thank you.
So yep. Let's look at the second part of this question this morning. And so the second one is, how are crystals in tissues released? Anybody want to give a go at that?
Well, I think part of that would be to get the start, it would be beginning with your physical principles, with, nutritional preparedness and making sure you're holding the point correctly. That would be a sort of a beginning spot for an answer to that. And
yeah, well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? How are crystals in tissues released? Okay, so let me go back to just a very, very brief explanation of what crystals actually are. And crystals can be anywhere in the body. And the reason we use the flow sheet, the flow sheet of sequential point holding, acupressure points, is to address that in a particular order that unravels things in a very productive way. So we start with SDO, so we're going to get some nerve supply and circulation going. So that's, that's great to start off with. But then we have to start from the top down in the endocrine system. It's not because we're moving from the top down in our awareness. It's because when we open up the unconsciousness, we have to have a place for it to move. So we start with pineal, for instance. The pineal is one of the first points we hold. So that's it's an interesting look, but so that pineal, by opening up the pineal, that actually has an effect on everything beneath it, essentially. Just like the emotional body, when you get to the level of enthusiasm, which resonates with the pineal, when you get to that point, then that level has a transmuting effect on everything beneath it. So similarly, so does opening up the pineal, or opening up pituitary, opening up the thyroid, opening up the heart, opening up the pancreas, adrenals. So we work in that, in that order, and that's why. So in tissues, if there's crystalline structures can, first of all, let me define crystalline structures in accordance to BE. So crystalline structures are, they attach themselves. They can be anywhere in the body. They can be, anywhere at all. They can be, and they can sort of expand and grow in certain spots. There's certain areas, depending on each person, it's very, very different from person to person. So, like C2s are often a great place. You can really find some good calcifications that grow on the upper cervicals. So, these are just sort of common ones that, over maybe eons of time, and I'm not just talking about a year or two or 60, I'm talking about eons of time. Our crystals come with us. They're energy that when we come back into a physical body, we recreate. We're recreating those crystalline structures from, in our current physical vessel. So what that crystalline structure holds is the memory, is the emotion, and is the word pattern from when it was resisted and put into a suppressed state. So that's what the crystalline structure is actually holding. We can be experiencing it in this lifetime. We don't have to go back, to the lifetime where it was maybe first resisted. We don't have to do that. That resistance is with us now in this body. So we can address it, in the here and now. Sometimes we do have to go back, if that's what comes up, and we bring that time period where we created it into the present, where it then can be released. Yeah. So that's just to give you just a tidbit of really what is, what is a crystalline structure, and why are we looking to release it? Yeah. Okay, so that's all the questions that I have for the moment. Any other questions that you fellas have?
I had some thoughts about the piezoelectric effect that John Ray taught about in relationship to the crystals. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I remember is that every crystal, when like a quartz crystal, if you apply pressure to a quartz crystal, it will release energy. So I feel that that's what's happened when we're holding points too, is we're applying pressure to these specific crystals that are in the tissue, and that starts to generate the memory, which, and crystals are basically generated 24/7 by us as our creative essence. And so they are the simultaneous compaction of thought, word, and emotion, according to the principles of bioelectronics. So as far as the scientific word, or the piezoelectric effect, was something that is something that people could look at and relate it to the physical world, like as far as a quartz crystal that's used a lot in every aspect of artificial intelligence.
Right. Right. Yeah, really good point. Something that came there. Oh, so we're actually recreating it unconsciously. So that's, I just wanted to add that in there. We're recreating those crystals unconsciously. And, you know, they're coming with us unconsciously. We don't, you know, we don't even know they're there until they surface, until we start to break them up, you know, either through, you know, the onset of the nutritional aspects, and in even the stillness and the breath can help start to dissolve the crystal, which means when it starts to dissolve, what really is, we're rendering up, we're allowing that crystal to show us what's actually being stored there, and then we can release it. Yeah. But a great tie-in there, Jeff. I like that tie-in with you know, the crystalline structures that we have, which are like the natural crystalline structures, and what certain people you know, want to sort of replicate or attempt to replicate through AI or through you know, technological. I just want to make that distinction. It's very, what we have is sort of like this, not sort of, this, what we have is this this natural natural process, and it is it's formulated from a divine essence, from the divine essence, from that perfection, from, you know, that's within each and every one of us. But it's interesting how we attempt to replicate, you know, the mind of humanity sometimes tries to replicate perfection, or replicate nature and try to make it even better. You know, let's, you know, I've heard so much about AI recently, you know, different people talking about how much, you know, how much more efficient it is than the human mind. Well, that's, you know, that's only true from a very limited perspective.
Can I expand on that just a little bit from
Please.
what I've been exposed to in a work with tuning forks? This woman has found that in the biofield, the toroid shape of the biofield, and she's actually been waving tuning forks as a massage therapist in people's biofield for years, and has created the biofield anatomy map. And what she's found is that the reason we don't remember, and that it is unconscious, is because our, like you said, pituitary, all these things which we created it and our ancestors created it, have numbed us to this intelligence, but nothing is forgotten in the biofield or the ether or the time-space continuum. And
Right.
so this intelligence, this power that animates our body, is flowing through us 24/7. And then however we choose to qualify that, that's our free will. But what I found interesting about her, name is Eileen Day McCusick, and I'm sure some people listening will have heard of her, but she's been able to help people remember very stuck memories by holding the tuning fork, just like we'd hold points, but she'll start at 6 feet away from the body, which is gestation and birth, she's found. And then when the resonance of the tuning fork changes, she'll stop and hold until the resonance clears. And basically she combs through the whole biofield to the midline, and then drops that energy into whatever chakra point she's working through to restore that stuck energy that's been in the biofield, creating 24/7 through the crystalline structure of the tissue that we can't remember because it's in the unconscious. But nothing gets forgotten in the ethereal realm or the Akashic records.
Right.
I find it very fascinating, the correlation between memory is actually being stored in this etheric bubble that we all live in.
Mm.
Yeah.
Our own personal Akashic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that ties in with what you asked earlier too, Guy, about so what's going on with, with the person on the table, and how do we know? So it's really that I really want to make that point very, very clear today, because it came up several times this morning for me, is that what we're doing is we're doing this internal work so that we personally, this is self-initiated work, so that we personally then have that, we have initiated the changes. We have we made those changes, because change only truly comes in consciousness. And until we change our own consciousness, like the point holding is only a stimuli. It doesn't do anything. Point holding's not doing anything to change consciousness. It's really what we do internally, the transmutation, the way that we can access the love, the forgiveness, and the gratitude, and apply it when we have those three things simultaneously together. It sounds very, very simple, but yet it takes a lot of effort and a lot of perseverance to get to the place where we're actually doing it. So it's really it's such a simple process, and that's one of the beauties of it. But it's really about consciousness change. We have to remember that as this is the four most important thing within the body electronics experience is consciousness change. That's what we're looking to do, a little bit at a time. Sometimes it comes and we'll just chip away, and then sometimes we'll have this huge movement where we access this immense resistance pattern that we've been holding, and we're able to access it and really be able to move it through those three powers. And then consciousness changes, and in turn we change our reactive mechanisms that have been unconsciously sort of running us from a very unconscious place. When they're removed, then we just live in a much more internally free way, which then is expressed externally. So I always bring myself back to that. What is it all about? It's all about consciousness change. It can really be simplified to that.
For just when you talk about that, I remember like the aha moment of realizing that was the truth. But John Ray, he would always say, if you look at the whole picture, and we were talking about principles of preparation, John said that 10% of body electronics is preparation and nutritional preparation and understanding the principles. And like you said, 90% of it is the conscious change. But without the nutritional and the physicality of having the healing we all desire, and the fountain of youth that's in each person, it's necessary to listen to your body and the very physical nourishment that it needs.
Mm-hmm. The physical principles are the foundation to the other 90%. They, the nutrition, the stillness, and the breath. Those are the three physical principles that lead us into the healing crises, and will allow then for what we need, that suppression to start to come up, and then we work with it.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of other. Do you want to jump in here, Guy? I know you have a time limit. You got up early in New Zealand this morning to participate.
Yeah.
You're going to work. So what's your timing?
Thank you. Yeah, I could spend a while longer. Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna just pop a question in here. When we're holding a point, just sometimes the crystals get so much bigger than. Do they get big enough that we can feel them in your experience? And it sort of makes sense to me that we've got 200 and whatever bones in our body. Do we sort of need to know a little bit about skeleton anatomy and so on, so that we know what are the sort of aberrations from the norm, so that we can sort of figure when we're on a crystal versus like for a new person sort of coming in?
Yeah. The answer to that is yes and no, because we must have a understanding. That's why I recommend Gray's Anatomy, and that can be downloaded online. There's lots of PDFs about Gray's Anatomy, or you can buy every used bookstore that I've ever been in has Gray's Anatomy, and Gray's Anatomy coloring book which is an interesting way to learn different the different processes in the body and where they lie. So yes, that's very, very important as a foundation. Yet if we get too heady in that, we start missing the point, and we can get too physical about it. So I say just get a Gray's Anatomy, and really know where know the spine, know where things are internally in the body. And then back to the first part of that question, I have often experienced crystalline structures when I'm holding points, particularly on the pineal. And often the pineal point, there'll be like if you get right on the point, which is it's just like a pinpoint, but if you can get right on the point, and it's usually you just use just a little bit of the side of your thumb, or you can hook it with your index finger too, if you're coming around the other way, and you can kind of come in and get at it that way. But often I have found on that particular point, it's almost like there's like an icicle. It's and it comes to a direct point. And I've felt that, and it's usually extremely painful. And I felt that melt away during the session when somebody's really working internally. And that's often happened with the pineal point for some reason. You'll often get, like with adrenals, you're getting into the different parts, like the adrenals, pancreas, and there'll be crunchy bits. There'll be you'll find those, but they'll be more like jumpy. What I mentioned before, there's often like pretty definite calcifications on the entire spine. Really, there's calcifications. So really depends on the person, but we can also get sidetracked by those external calcifications if we're looking at it with our mind. Oh, there's a calcification there, let's hold it. Then we can really miss the point there, because that's getting way too mechanical. And body electronics is not a mechanical process. So we can take a bit of that so that we have an overview of what we're doing, yet it's some very, very, very powerful crystals could be etheric. They could be not present in the physical at all. Yeah. So we have to really watch how mechanical we get, and that's the mind wants to sort of take it into more mechanical.
Thank you. Great answer.
You want to add to that? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I remember you saying to me in 2015, it's not a mechanical process, and you really sort of emphasized that back then. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I don't think I believed that I was treating it like a mechanical process. And it took another sort of 6 months or a year or something before I could sort of look back at that time and think, wow, I kind of was treating it really mechanically back then. So it was kind of it was a bit of a funny lesson.
Well, it's such a meeting of both, right? Because we do have, it is, we can say, well, point holding is mechanical in a way. So it is to some degree, what it is, but if we take it over that edge, where you allow the mind to sort of take over and want it to be, very sequentially, very medically, let's say medically, that's just the word that comes to mind,
Anatomically.
scientifically or whatever. Yeah. Sorry, what did you say, Jeff?
Anatomically correct.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's not one or the other. It's both. Yeah. We just have to know, we have to develop that intuition and that inner guidance, that connection that we have to the response ability to be able to move through and know exactly what to do in the moment. Yeah. At certain times I've thrown out all mechanics, in that higher and lower law process. So it's like, okay, we're going to follow the lower laws in order to access the higher laws, but then we have to throw out, those lower laws altogether to access another, to go higher. So we have to know how to navigate that process. Yeah. It comes with experience. It comes with perseverance.
One thing I'll say now, in that regards, that I remember is, and for people listening that have not held points before, or had their points held, and they are aware of the anatomically correct position for whatever point's being held, it tends to be a distraction because you're on the table and you feel, well, I can't do this if they're not holding the point right. My internal mechanisms or my internal conscious change can't work, and that's where you get into trouble. And as we evolved into the visualization consciousness, of course, we learned that quite dramatically. You and I did.
Because you don't hold in visualization conscious. We are not holding points anymore. We're our own internal point holder. Yeah, and there's a great, I see, we see that pattern so often, and you'll get somebody on the table, and of course, that's a great example because we have to be on the point. And that's what the instructor's there for, to get everybody plugged in appropriately. And then, but sometimes people can like slide off. Well, then it's the point holdee's responsibility to say, oh, you're off the point. Can you come back on the point? Or I'd like more pressure. Or I'd like less pressure. Whatever. It's that, it's the point holdee's responsibility to respond in that way. Yet we also have to be on the lookout for when that crosses the threshold of not being practical anymore and actually is a pattern being presented, in which case nothing is ever done right. Nobody ever does things right for me.
Right.
Like that sort of thing, or many variations of that. And so then we have to be very internally aware of when that threshold is crossed. And then we're like, okay, so I get it. And then you just go with it. And you can really get a lot of memory, word patterns, and emotion that come up from that alone.
Yeah, that's true. It happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Everything anything and everything. If we're truly desiring and looking to be able to recognize ourselves and be able to release patterns, we can, and we're really aware of our environment and aware of the speech, aware of what's going on. I'm talking about the inner environment particularly, but external environment as well. Triggers people and circumstance, gives us triggers. We can really, really make a lot of very, very vast changes if we can, maintain that awareness in daily life. With the not just the awareness, but then taking it into the process of transmutation. Yeah. Anything else there, Guy?
Yeah, I'm thinking a few different questions. One of them, which I think, but one of them would be like, how do we? You've heard this question before. How do we know if we're living freely versus just wallowing in our behavioral patterns where we're not good enough or someone else isn't good enough, or we're just sort of going round and round same thing over and over again versus living freely and evolving.
You want to jump on that, Jeff?
Well, let's see. There's been times since I've felt like I was wallowing, since we haven't had point holding groups, and it's been many years now, and I struggle to find ways in which I feel like I am shifting consciousness, or like I've shared different modalities or narratives as far as how to bring memory to the surface, so I can. But a lot of times it's like it'll feel like you're wallowing, but then I think you described it, simultaneously letting it happen and making it happen. It's like it's really hard to make consciousness change happen. Sometimes it's years. And I remember Doug speaking that once at a seminar, and I thought to myself, he said, sometimes people get into a level of consciousness, and I think I would include myself in that, in which they had no idea they were getting into, and it's bigger than they can handle. And as instructors, we have to be willing to let them wallow for a while until they can transmute it themselves. You cannot, as an instructor, you cannot do it for anybody. So is that kind of, I think that was pretty good response, Guy. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting point. Yeah, I wish I'd gone to some of Doug's seminars, but bit of regret to transmute there. Yeah.
Well, I will add to that. For me, there's two main ways that we can be stimulated without point holding, without without going to an event, without attending an intensive. And for me, it's the physical body gives you lots of opportunity. All you have to do is get really mineralized and be still for an hour without moving at all, while breathing deep and regular and being aware of your body. That's literally all anyone needs to start breaking down some crystals and getting some serious information from the physicality that can then be used to access the emotion, word patterns, and memory. We'll get, if we don't twitch, move, adjust, scratch, whatever these things are that stop us from being perfectly still, if we can truly be perfectly still and be present with the physicality, that's self-point holding, in my opinion.
Right. And I think that's what I've relegated myself to, and a lot of us who have had our points held a lot, and then is that you, you basically be still and know that I am God, and the I am I'm referring to is not is that same light that's in everybody, and that's how you get to know the that you are divine, and that you're versus artificial intelligence, your real intelligence or divine intelligence, and all of the artificial intelligence is just a reflection of that, and it tends to be a pattern that artificial intelligence wants to take over and make, and it's been the pattern for eons that humans are dispensable and insignificant. But all of this Silicon Valley business, that's all come from within our own consciousness. Even like I've heard that a lot of the Disney characters came while people are tripping on acid, which is like a crystal or whatever. So we are the real intelligence, and that's certainly not at the forefront of the media today, because it's certainly being pushed, the artificial intelligence, as you're well aware.
It's accessing that divine intelligence that is the purpose of body electronics, the accessing of it incrementally. The that freedom that we have to be able to access love. That's the freedom. That's the freedom within, to be able to access it. We can only access that when we remove resistance. All of the natural things that are, we can only describe with some kind of very inept words, but let's say, like love, for instance, but that energy that is within each and every being naturally, and that connector, that connector that is within, that is shrouded by eons of resistance.
Yeah.
And it's very complex.
Yeah, the memory of the memory of most people, as a general principle, that's been forgotten, is conception to age 3 or 4. And so as I progress, that's where I've focused my attention on my own self, and I found a lot there. And I just of course, time itself is a human creation when you look at the time space continuum. And just I just passed my 66th birthday, which was probably one of the happiest birthdays I've had in many, many years, because I had given up the traditional concept of that I was raised in. But anyway, I had an enjoyable day, and it was Yeah, 66, the mark of the beast, 666. We are the beast, right? The 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons of the carbon-based life forms that we are. So we are collectively the beast that we're all individually and collectively responsible for either transmuting, or, like I like to say, game over, reboot. If we don't,
we're unbeasting. We're unbeasting in body electronics.
Yeah,
uncreating the beast.
Yeah.
I want to jump back to what you said, the question that you had earlier, Guy. It just came in. So how, like, part of the question, I might be saying it a little bit wrong, but what just came is that, how do we know that we're not wallowing? That was sort of part of the question, right? So I would say just simply in that is how, we're always given opportunities in life, unless we're, living in a cave somewhere, silent, just alone, and have become a breatharian. We are going to get feedback from our personal simulation. And that feedback is going to give us opportunity to be able to see where we're going on this evolutionary process. And for instance, we will discover that we have much more compassion. And it comes naturally. The compassion just flows appropriately when we have opportunity to offer that compassion and see, and see how that happens. And then we can recognize that, we can recognize, wow, maybe that wasn't there before, or, we can see those evolutionary aspects within us as how they're expressed, how we can be less resistant and more tolerant, much more, more tolerant of things requiring tolerance. I'll add to that. I'll put a little qualification on there, because there's certain things we're being called to right now to be not tolerant of at all externally. So it's again back to that appropriateness and that ability, that responsibility, that ability to respond.
Discernment and higher and lower law.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. I remember reading, I think, in one of the Logic and Sequence books a long time ago, where John's saying, if we give into the reaction, we're sort of strengthening the hold that the reaction has over us. Maybe that's not entirely appropriate here.
Absolutely is. Yeah.
That
even applies to food. So it applies,
doesn't it?
Yeah. The justifications, when the justifications come in,
yeah.
Oh, I'll just have a little bit of that. That'll be okay. And that it won't hurt that much, have a couple of cookies here and whatever there. So that applies in everything that we're doing. We're literally becoming self-aware. It's our own body electronics is a process of self-realization.
I love that phrase you have in your book. There's no BE police. This is self-mastery.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I thought that was a real bullseye.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that goes with that question you answered too. There's nobody policing us. There's nobody, and we're not policing anybody else. Where, this is a freedom, this is a personal freedom. We choose it in whatever level we choose to do it in. We can choose to do, some of the nutritional process, and that nutritional process can gain traction over years, like you said, Jeff. So sometimes it takes years. I can look back at 20 years. I wasn't ready and willing to give up wheat, even though it would have really done me good, and I wasn't ready and willing to give up sugar. So these processes, sometimes take a little time, and again, it's that self-mastery, that gaining more strength and willingness.
Yeah.
And applying that willingness.
Yeah. I found a really important sort of step on that is that when I can look at my past behavior and say, like we talk about love a lot, and when I can sort of look back at certain behavior and say, well, I thought I was loving, but really I wasn't, really I was just denying my anger or my hate or something like that, or denying my real honest expression, and then sort of sugarcoating something nasty and then calling it love.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely. That brings up something I had written down. Just this is my last thing that I have down today, which you just stimulated there. Projection, non-projection. So do either of you have anything to say about, like, in terms of mostly emotion? Let's keep it mostly, well, it can be word patterns too, but mostly in terms of emotion, that they're really principles of projection, non-projection. It's something that we have to really keep in the forefront of the process, because especially in the beginning, when we're just starting, and there seems to be these floodgates that open because of so much suppression, and especially the emotional body. I mean, the emotional body's been suppressed for, who knows how long. I mean, how many eons of time have we suppressed emotion, and we're just, continuing on the, on that path until we stop it. And then there's this floodgate that comes to the surface, this floodgate of emotion. And it's really important for everybody to keep that willingness and that awareness not to project on our external environment, especially when we get into the higher emotions. The victimized emotions of unconsciousness, apathy, and grief aren't very, like, they're not really projectors. They're more internal, like it's internalized, because it's it's life happening to us. So it's more of a incoming energy. But then when we get into the higher emotions, especially when we get up into anger, it turns, and it's more of a the energy is going outward, and you have to become very adept at that point not to project into your external environment. If you feel anger, then you really feel it, you get really, you really intensify it, and you apply the principles of transmutation. Really love how it feels, really love how anger feels, find the word patterns that go with it, find the memory that goes with it, bringing into the present moment, and really transmute it back into the void as pure energy.
You said that so well.
Mm.
I'm getting lots of compliments today. Yeah, I really appreciate. I think this is really, really important it's a lot easier for us to speak, I think, when we're together.
Mm.
I have videos when I do videos by myself as well, and it's just a little bit more difficult. And I really love the Q&A. I think the Q&A is a really great way to bounce things around, and brings up other aspects too, and they all seem to fit together.
Yeah. Fiction.
Mm-hmm. Anything else today, fellas, that you feel to bring up?
I feel complete.
I think we did. I do too, actually. I feel it's really there's a lot of, if you can really contemplate what we were speaking of today, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's end it here. Thank you, fellas, for bringing this together and sharing this time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
See you next
Thank
Tuesday.
you.
All right. See ya.
Yeah, so long.